I'm Keith Hart. We're trying to document some very unique individuals that ended up in Carter County by several different routes. We're trying to focus on the Williams family, the Boren family, the Hart family, the Taylor family, and the Burdick family, and many of the other families that came in association with them from approximately 1740 to 2012. We're speaking from a log cabin close to 301 Laurels Road, Johnson City, Tennessee. The land that's right across the street from here has been in the Williams, Taylor, Boren, Burdick, Hart family since 1782. The individual who got here originally was Edmund Williams. He was born in Wales in 1740. He was a very unique individual. He was first on a safety committee before the First Continental Congress met in Philadelphia. After that, he was assigned a Justice of the Peace by Congress at Halifax for the county of Pitt. He married a young lady, Lucretia Adams, and she was born in Maryland in 1737. It's kind of interesting that he ended up here after the Revolutionary War. He bought 400 acres on this particular tract. He received other lands for land grants from his service in the Revolutionary War. But this 400 acres, of who the original land grant is with Larry, Kent, and Beverly Burdick today in a safety deposit box, this land grant consisted of paying 50 shillings per 100 acres for 400 acres touching Buffalo Creek toward Vest Greenhouse or toward the Laurels. We'll get into a lot of his descendants and some of the different stories and hardships that they faced. But let's jump into the other side of the family that came into Carter County. This was Leonard Hart. He was born in Germany. Allegedly, he had two brothers that settled in Burke County, North Carolina, around Morganton. Leonard came down to Holston and is settled in what is today Piney Flats in Sullivan County. He was born in 1758 and went over to the Battle of Kings Mountain October the 7th, 1780. As you look back at this, we wonder, how did he get angry enough, and how did this group of people get angry enough to march to Kings Mountain to declare their independence from England? So there was a tremendous amount going on in this area, struggling, strife, independence, trying to break away from governmental rule. But these individuals were part of that. Leonard, of who we descend, had a son, Solomon. This is his 11th child. So what happened after the Battle of Kings Mountain, he came back and bought 200 acres in Carter County, right behind Sycamore Shoals State Park. And he went into farming. He had 3 wives and 13 children. Most of us descend from Solomon. The children from Solomon moved toward Johnson City later on. We come from the Reverend A.P. Hart. The original Hart Cemetery is located over in what they refer to as Turkey Town. And that cemetery is in a great deal of disarray today. It's broken up stones, but a lot of our ancestors and a lot of our heritage struggled there. Like I said, the Harts really began to move over to Johnson City. By 1880, we were well in Johnson City because Will Hart had a harness shop there, and he was a very outstanding man. You can look at how he helped the family. He was one of the first mayors of Johnson City. When my dad's father died, when Dad was 3, he built a house for that family of 4 children. He gave them food. Dad made the comment many times, if he hadn't given food, they would have gone hungry. He believed in strong family ties and the family holding together. His harness shop was located right close to where Free Service Tire Company is today in Johnson City. Let's switch gears and come back to Carter County and we're going to come back to the Boren home place. Very unique structure. It's a little bit questionable exactly the date that this structure was built, but best we can tell, it was around 1860 or slightly after that time. It was built by Wiley Wilson Boren, and he paid somebody $1 a day for a year to build that structure. He had 2 children that made really a tremendous impact here in the county. The older child was George Edmund Boren, and the other child was William Gallatin Boren. William Gallatin is where Jane Burdick, or Jane Taylor, and Lucy Taylor, Lucy being my mother, descend from that family. A lot of stories about that house, because when Edmund settled here, he built a log cabin right beside that structure. The logs from that structure, some of them went into that house, most of them went into the barn which adjoins the house. There were several children there. Sarah Jane Williams married a Taylor, and they had Molly Taylor, Lucy Taylor, who is my grandmother's mother, and also was the mother of William Gallatin Boren, and Columbus Taylor. This family was very prosperous. They were heavy into farming, but they also split in different directions and moved from East Tennessee. The youngest of these children of my grandmother being second to the youngest, was Martin Boren. And Uncle Martin was quite a baseball player. He found that his way up in the world was to go to Harlan, Kentucky for the coal fields. Back in that time, if you had some athletic ability, especially in baseball, you could go to these coal companies and they would hire you, they would train you. They made an accountant out of Uncle Martin. I remember this man well. He eventually ended up in Knoxville. He married Teddy Howard from Harlan, Kentucky. Her father was a medical doctor, and Aunt Teddy was very highly educated and a very good person. Some of the other people that evolved out of this, and the reason we have photos of these people today, is the fact that they were in the closet in the home place. One of these unique individuals, personality-wise, was referred to as Little Jack Williams. He was a blacksmith by trade. He definitely liked alcohol. He also was somewhat what we would refer to as a male chauvinist. He put in his will that if his wife remarried, she didn't get anything. And so he very much was a different personality, but he was an aggressive personality and did a lot of different things. What we do see in the family is some real strong bonds and strong relationships. My grandmother, Mary Boren Taylor, was an individual. I guess if different people look at influence of their lives, my grandmother, Mary Boren Taylor, influenced a lot of my thought processes. She definitely influenced my love for agriculture. This was a very independent woman. She had all kinds of things going on and made a real difference in the number of lives of others. When she was quite young, the doctors came to the conclusion that she had tuberculosis. At that time, we didn't have the tuberculin drugs we have today. So what was done, her dad, William Gallatin Boren, put her on a train over here at Okolona, and she rode the train to Asheville, North Carolina. To be a young girl taken out of this environment had to have been a huge thing. But in the photo that you'll see, she's the second person from the left, and she's sitting with a number of other TB patients, because at that time the best cure for TB was to put you in a healthy environment and eat good food and build up your body strength. So that had a dramatic influence on her and her life. The other thing you can see, she loved farming and she loved agriculture. You see her here on a bale of wagon load of hay with Mr. Hicks being pulled by a couple of mules. But one of the individuals who had probably the greatest personality and the greatest change around here was a man named Wiley Wilson Boren. and he would be my great-great-grandfather. He had a pretty hard upbringing. His father was Bartley born, and he married Rhoda Taylor, or Rhoda Williams. They had 8 children, and then things went terribly wrong, and he, on Christmas Day in 1840, he took a stone and hit her in the head, and they thought she was dead, and they even put that she was dead in the family Bible. We don't know after that. What we do know was she didn't die until 1886. So she didn't die, but she was unconscious for several days, and they thought she was dead. He left here, or was killed by her brothers. We don't know which. And that's the way things were handled at that point in time. We didn't have domestic court violence and those things we have today. But Wiley Wilson was the first child born, so he would have been 8 years old. Well, he was raised through that environment, and then became a very unique person here. And all that's documented in the family Bible, and it's kind of interesting. You're looking at a photo now of Wiley Wilson with an oxen. Livestock were extremely important. They were economic assets at that point in time, and these pictures were taken up at the home place. One of the unique things we have to document part of the turmoil that was going on during the Civil War period here in Carter County was on March 27th of 1865, not 20 feet from where we sit right now. General Stoneman brought 4,000 Union troops past here, and they wrote a note to Wiley Wilson Boren, my great-granddad. It says, to Wiley Wilson Boren, 1 horse taken by the 12th Kentucky Cavalry, 2nd Brigade under General Stoneman. Well, we find on the internet that in March of 1865 there were 4,000 Union troops in Jonesboro, and they were given orders to go to North Wilkesboro and put the rebels down. Now realize this is only 2 or 3 weeks before the Civil War is over, but they're still confiscating animals and livestock and going through this area. Other things that we find in the home place that Larry and Beverly and Kent and my aunt have shared with us that I think are really unique. In 1891, Wiley Wilson evidently wasn't feeling too well. More than likely he was diabetic. But if you look at the healthcare system, it was basically non-existent. To get to healthcare, a pharmacist was our doctor. So he would have ridden a horse over here to Okolona, gotten on a train and gone to Irwin. Well, the doctor was at a pharmacy called W.S. Pire, P-I-R-I-E and Company. But he wrote him a really neat little letter here, and let me just try to read a little of this to you. It says, Wiley Wilson Boren, Dear Sir, from a careful examination of your urine, it is in my mind doubtful whether anything can be done in your part or not. But if you do not follow the careful remedies that I've laid out, it will go to a fatal termination quicker than if you do not. And he was going to prescribe a diet for him, and he was going to Johnson City on the train the next day, and he would be glad to stop by and talk to him about this. So that was the level of medical care that we had going on at that time. Education in the Boren family and Williams family was a high priority, and that's an interesting thing. Milligan College was in its infancy during this period of time. But Wiley Wilson did send both of his sons to Milligan College. Now, to pull a young person off the farm at that time, that's losing an economic asset. But he valued education, and this is important. Uncle George Edmund Boren, graduated from Milligan in 1882. I'm not sure if William Gallatin ever graduated from Milligan. Matter of fact, a number of the neighbors questioned why he kept sending him to school over there. And his comment was that even though he didn't seem too sharp, he felt like if he stayed around smart people long enough, something would rub off on him. So there was a real value in education here. To walk from here over to Milligan's a good 3/4 to a mile. So it just shows you that level of importance that they put on education. These people went to school at what we call Cave Spring School, from the home place. Now this is over near where Wayne Ayers built the Old Barn restaurant. So they cut across the hill here. They went through a creek, Buffalo Creek, and then they went to the school. One of the photos you'll be looking at shows them all in front of the school. One of my ancestors even took and marked his picture out because he didn't want his photo taken. And then there's Uncle Martin, and then our grandmother, Mary Bourne Taylor, is in that. But they did consistently believe in education. This area through here and where these children played in, my grandmother and my uncles and their ancestors before them, one of these caves is right over the hill to our left. It's called Rock House Cave. It's a huge cave system. The other one is Saltpeter Cave. That's one of the reasons why our Revolutionary War soldiers were so effective through here. They could take the bat dung, mix it with charcoal, and mix it with sulfur, and produce a very good powder. So they didn't have to get their explosives from away from here. They were able to develop them here locally. But these cave systems make a huge difference as far as survival. The Indians used them, and our ancestors used them. Animals played I've mentioned before, animals played a huge role in what took place here. Animals are so important. The photo you're seeing is a mule with Nell Anderson sitting on it. And the Ford truck there that was pulled out of Buffalo Creek by Ashley the mule, it got to be a joke. Was car power or mechanical power going to outweigh animal power? Well, we all know the answer to that today, but at that time, it was still an unknown quantity whether the technology that produced the automobile was really going to win out. But what is interesting in this, the fellow who owned Ashley the mule was a Mr. Haynes, and he did write a letter about that, and I think that letter is pretty unique. My Aunt Jane shared that with me 3 or 4 years ago, and we copied it, plus that picture of them on the mule. But basically, that letter was written to my grandmother at that time down in Pike County. Well, actually it's Ray County, Pikeville. And her husband, L.P. Taylor, it was 1922. And basically what he said in there was how much he missed them and that he was leaving here soon, and he meant to will Ashley the mule to my grandmother. And that just shows you that to will items of that value, they had an economics importance at that time. Let's focus on a very colorful individual in Carter County. And many of the history books talk about this man. This man was George Edmund Boring. He was born up here at the home place. In the picture of the home place, he would be the one standing on the right against the rail. He eventually married Ida Folsom. But Uncle George, as I mentioned before, graduated from Milligan in 1882. What he achieved, he went to Cumberland Law School. He also, more than that, he was appointed to the U.S. Department of Justice from 1907 to 1916. And he also went back to Washington under President Harding. When my mom was a little girl, one of the greatest things that ever happened to her and Aunt Jane was he and Aunt Ida would send a footlocker on the train from Washington, D.C. back to Johnson City. And he put in it full of Christmas gifts. And back then, today, that doesn't seem to be a big thing. At that time, that was Christmas for them. And they would ride into Johnson City, and they would get the footlocker, and they'd bring it back out here to the home place and open up their Christmas gifts. My grandmother idolized her uncle, thought he was just beyond words. So much that her other brothers were jealous and said, well, he isn't all that great. Well, he did. To come out of this culture and achieve what he did achieve was rather remarkable. As I mentioned, he married Ida Folsom. And as a young person being raised not right around here because Dad was on different military bases, I heard about the Folsom family but didn't really even know where their house was. But just stories about them. Ida Folsom was the only daughter of a Confederate officer in Carter County. We had maybe 6 Union officers from Carter County. But where my office is in Elizabethton with UT Extension, we are in that structure. And it's owned by Carter County. If Uncle George and Aunt Ida had not existed, our office would not be there today. And we may be able to tell part of that story and we may not. What we do know is that you'll be viewing a picture of the Folsom house. That picture was out here in the home place, and I was going through the closet one time and I saw that picture and I realized that that was my office in Elizabethton. Uncle George had that picture in the closet, and since then we made numerous copies of that and gave it to some of the Folsom family because they didn't have those photos. But in that photo of the Folsom house, Major Folsom and his wife are out front. Just a very different time. The other thing that's interesting about that is that that house was not burned to the ground during the Civil War period. Major Folsom was an extremely highly respected man in Elizabethton. The house directly across the street from Major Folsom was built by Colonel Carter. Colonel Carter was the highest ranking Union officer in Carter County. So across the street from each other you had the highest ranking Confederate officer and the highest ranking Union officer, and both those houses remained standing after the Civil War. And that's a very unique thing to happen. It just shows you that level of respect for individuals. George Bourne is buried beside Major Folsom in Highland Cemetery there in Elizabethton up on Arney Hill. So is Aunt Ida. Mom, when she was a little girl, and Jane, Mom remembers going into the wake for Uncle George. She also remembers vividly when Aunt Ida passed away, and Aunt Jane and her both went in there and helped take care of Aunt Ida and look after her. And it was a very tough time, but there was a really strong bond that existed between these people. One of the things that's a really unique story, this bond was so strong, when Aunt Ida would come out here, and that had to have been on a horse and buggy at that point in time, she would put Aunt Jane and Mom on her lap, and she would have 2 diamonds on her hand. And she would take one diamond off and she would put it on my mom's finger, and she would take the other diamond off and put it on Aunt Jane's finger, and said, when you get married, this will be your diamond ring. It just shows the level of bondship that existed there. And the photo you're looking at here is Mom and Jane and Aunt Ida. Also, there was the brothers were strong in their relationships. Uncle Martin is pictured here holding Aunt Jane and my mom. My mom has the dressed up fancy hat on top in front of the home place. He idolized these 2 girls. That was obvious because of the amount of time that I was able to spend there whenever we were back in the States in Knoxville at Uncle Martin's house. The next photo is a really unique shot of Mom in front of the home place with a fancy dressed hat. There's a car behind. Aunt Gertrude is sitting in the back, and Uncle Bob's on the right-hand side. Uncle Bob served 4 years in World War I as a quartermaster. Aunt Gertrude was the principal at what was that time called the training school at East Tennessee State College, Teachers College, today University. But they took Jane and Mom into town about the 5th grade and put them all the way through high school and put them through college too. Here again goes back to this bond of people looking after family. Family ties were strong and they meant something. And it was a part of the responsibility of the family to look after each other. My grandmother, like I say, made a lot of different impressions. In the photo you're looking at here, her husband, LP, they went over to what they call Horseshoe Dam, and she's kind of waving at us there. And today that's called Wilbur Dam. But there's some really neat photos there. There's also a really neat photo here that's at Dayton, Tennessee. It's Jane's on the left, Mom's taller, but they had gone down to the home place where L.P. Taylor was from, their dad, and they owned some land down there. And matter of fact, his brother was one of the jurors on the Scopes trial, and that was a huge thing at that point in time. If you study Tennessee history and religious history, It was a unique time when things went on. Matter of fact, I have one of the small pictures of them there at the home place right here, and it was a very unique place. I remember getting to go there when I was in the 2nd grade. There was a spring below the house. They had to walk down there and get the water, but it was built a lot like the home place up here. The other picture there is another picture of L.P. Taylor and Mom and Aunt Jane there at Wilbur Dam. This would have probably been taken, Mom was born in 1923, so she looks like she's 2 to 3 years old there. So that was probably taken in 1926 to give you an idea of about the time. The next 2 photos I treasure. They didn't come from direct descendants of the family. This individual lived in a little house down here right beside the Beach Cliff Church. That house was not originally there, according to Lee Persinger. It was down, Lee's mother was an Anderson, but his father was a Persinger from Watauga, and they bottled milk and sold it around Johnson City. But the house was down there, and they took mules and rollers, and they rolled the house up on the hill to get it away from the creek. But one day in 1976, I was sitting on the porch talking to Lee about family and history, and Lee said, "Keith, I've got 2 pictures here in the closet that you might like to look at." Well, one of them is this picture of a sawmill. His father worked there, and this sawmill was located between Gap Creek and Powder Branch. But what they're sawing here is white oak, and they were making the barrel staves for the liquor industry in Johnson City. So that's a really unique photo. The other photo was of a rock quarry which was located right in front of Happy Valley Elementary School. That's full of water today. But Jim Buck was the foreman of this group, and it shows the harsh working conditions those individuals endured, busting those rocks and making stone for the railroad and the other road to Johnson City. The reason I know those 2 pictures are so precious is later Lee died and the house burned, and so those original photographs were destroyed. So I've shared those with a lot of people, and we're losing history, and we're losing some of those unique things that are of value. We're going to jump back to the Hart family a little bit and move back into some of the things around Johnson City. There's another, both the Williams and the Taylors and the Bournes and the Harts had strong family ties to take care of each other. One of my grandfather, Benjamin Franklin Hart's brothers, was Joseph. Joseph married a Hendricks, would have been out from around the central community, had 4 children. One of those children died at 20, 21, 22. The other one was Paul Hart. The other one was Ed Hart. The other one was Marybelle Hart. But Ed Hart, and all of them, after the Hendricks wife died, he evidently went into a state of depression. So my grandmother, Eula Pickering Hart, took all 4 of those youngsters in and was taking care of them, plus the 4. 3 of those youngsters decided to go back with their dad, Joseph, and leave the area. Ed Hart decided to try to stay here in Johnson City with his uncle, who would have been Benjamin Franklin Hart, my dad's father. Another sad, tough time started in that family. He came down with cancer of the jaw in his early 40s. What he realized was that there was no way his wife could take care of their 4 children and also take care of Ed Hart. So he went to his best friend, Ed Beckner at Beckner Jewelers, and he asked Ed if he would take in this Ed Hart, and he agreed to. So they moved Ed Hart into the back of the jewelry store called Beckner's Jewelers, and he learned the jewelry trade. And Ed Beckner even set him up and helped him get an office just down the street from his, and actually put him in the jewelry business in competition with him. So evidently those ties were pretty strong at that point in time. We talk about him, my grandfather dying of cancer. We heard a lot of different stories of Dad in that. Dad was 3 when his father died. The oldest child born to Benjamin Franklin was my Uncle Frank Hart. He worked at Free Service Tire Company for 43 years. But he quit school in the 7th grade to go support the family. There was also Lucy Hart and Lois Hart. They all started a boarding house. They kept boarders. We didn't have the Social Security backup systems that we have today. If you didn't work, you starved to death. So Dad made a comment one time. He got a paper route when he was very young, and he had $50, which at that time was huge. Dad was born in 1914. His mother needed the money to pay rent on the boarding house, so she took his $50. He never got over that. For him to have earned that money and then realize that he needed to support where he lived was a pretty tough thing for a very young person, but it was real. Dad's father was a baseball player. He played for what they call the Johnson City Nine. In the photo you'll look at on the baseball team, he's in the middle on the left-hand side as you're looking at the picture. He has a small cap on and a mustache. He was also a wallpaper hanger, and he also pitched professional ball for a short period of time with the Pirates. He married Eula Pickering from Chucky. She has been extremely difficult to find anything out about. We do know that she had two half-brothers that showed up at the house one time, and Aunt Lois came home, my dad's sister, and said, "Who were those two people?" And she said, they're your half-brothers. She never invited them to see them, talk to them. We don't know what went on within that family, but whatever it was not real good. So she basically broke total ties with that family when she came to Johnson City. Maybe not totally. Dad talked about his mother putting him on a train and driving and taking the train ride to Chucky to meet her mother, who had remarried to Stokes. So there may have been some bonds there in some degree. Another slide you're beginning to look at here will be of a cemetery marker. It's got T.C. Hart on it, Tennessee Columbus Hart. I've always wondered, who did the Harts fight for? Were they for the Confederacy, or were they for the Union, or did they just not want to be around a war at all? T.C. Hart definitely was in the 4th Tennessee Infantry, and he did live through the war, and he was buried there at the home place, and his stone is one of those that's among those broken up. So some of the Harts did get back here, and they did fight for the Confederacy from what those markers show. Some of the Taylors and the Williams were definitely more toward the Confederacy. But what a lot of people don't realize is Johnson County, Carter County, Sullivan County, Unicoi County, and Greene County were predominantly Union. We were not Confederate here. A lot of people think that this goes back to the Revolutionary War days, where we worked so hard to form a union that they didn't want to see this split up. And so a lot of turmoil going on at that time. Families are interesting. Mothers and daughters are interesting in all their trials and tribulations. One of Dad's sisters was Lucy. She died relatively young. I never got to meet her. I do think she's very unique. You'll see a photo of her later. I'm looking at a photo to my right of Lucy. She eventually married Cecil Bolton, but my grandmother didn't like Cecil at all. Matter of fact, when he would come to the house, she would send out Lois out to not allow him to come into the house. But she went ahead and married him anyway, and my grandmother was not happy until they divorced. One of the interesting things, all of our parents, we're a part of our parents, and we're part of what their background and what they experienced in life. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes it's kind of trying. But Dad had he always wanted to get ahead in the world. And he was doing a number of different things, but one day in the boarding house, one of the boarders in there knew there was a plane coming at what they call Cox's Lake over the other side of Johnson City. And what they did here, for a penny a pound, they would let you go up and fly around Johnson City. Well, Dad weighed about 97 pounds. So anyway, this boarder paid the 97 cents for Dad to go up and fly around Johnson City. And Dad was probably 14 years old at this point in time. And he said from that experience that he knew from that experience, no matter what happened in life, he wanted to be a pilot. And everything he did after that. He would hitchhike to the Johnson City Airport and wash planes all day for Louis Hilbert, and then he would let Louis would take him up and fly him around for 5 or 6 minutes for washing planes all day. Well, Dad's mom found out about this, and she sent Uncle Frank out there to Louis Hilbert to tell him if he ever let Bill Hart up in a plane again, he'd kill him. Well, that didn't deter Dad, and he eventually bought a Piper Cub. He got in the civilian flying school at East Tennessee Teachers College, and moved on from there. Dad had a pretty hard upbringing. Basically, there wasn't any money. Of course, none of the young people had money at that time. But when he was 13, on Thanksgiving Day, he went in and asked his mom if he could go to the rifle range with a boy down the street. And she said, no, we're going to eat Thanksgiving dinner. Well, they were living at 400 West Myrtle Avenue at that time, so he went down there and told him. Well, his dad, just before Dad got back to the house, the kid looked over at another kid and said, watch me get him. And the kid just took the gun and shot him from a block away. Probably if you asked that youngster today or back then, you wouldn't know why he did something that stupid. He just did. But anyway, that took Dad out of school for a year. It was a very trying time because they didn't have x-rays to locate the bullet, and the bullet had to work itself out naturally, or they would have had to cut the muscle in the leg where he would have had a severe limp the rest of his life. But she was determined after that to move from that neighborhood. So they moved over to where the Elks Club in Johnson City is today, close to where the old hospital is, and then they moved to Spring Street, 602 Spring Street in Johnson City. But the only reason they were able to make these moves goes back to that Uncle Will Hart, Dad's uncle. And he's the one that had the harness shop, and he's the one that built them a house, furnished the furniture, and looked after that family after his brother died. So again, it shows you the commitment from family that existed within this group. About that time is when Dad met Mom. Dad was several years older than Mom. Mom was going out to the university, and she can tell this story a lot better than I can, but it was an English class, and Dad was on the back row, and Mom was on the front row. And it didn't take her long to realize he was very flamboyant, and it didn't take him long to realize if he was going to pass English, he needed to get to know her better. So I think that's what got things going. So they met in an English class. At that time, Mom was living in town, and but they would be out here at the farm during the weekends, and there was a fireplace that you're looking at now that's directly across from the home place, and this was kind of a social gathering place. They grilled hot dogs, they grilled hamburgers, and I'm pretty sure that Mom's father, L.P. Taylor, built many of these things. He built the garage for the cars to sit in. He built a large chicken house. He did a number of things out here to improve the property. The next photo shows Mom and Aunt Jane, probably about 1943, out at East Tennessee State Teachers College. They're on a park bench. This is before, while Dad would have been in the Pacific, and we'll talk about how that developed. Then you're looking at Mom with they called it Band Day, and it's in her band uniform. She was very proud of this. She's a pretty good musically oriented individual, as I'm definitely not. Dad also during this time, or slightly before this, he had one of the few cars in Johnson City, and this car originally came from Elizabethton. One of the boarders in the boarding house had to go to Arizona to try to get over an illness. So he took him to Elizabethton, and they drove this car back to Johnson City. Dad painted it in the colors of the Science Hill colors today. But actually it was Johnson City High School back then. And his sister Lois took this picture, and she gave it to me years ago, Aunt Lois did. And it is a treasure. And on the side of the door, it has varsity written on it, as you can see in the photo. And also it has Bill Hart pilot, Harry Cook co-pilot. So all Dad was thinking about during these periods of time is what he could do to get ahead and be a pilot at some point in time. A number of things happened here. The picture you're looking at now, Dad graduated from flight school at Randolph Field and then went to Kelly Field. Dad graduated from Kelly Field the week that World War II broke out. So he was commissioned, I think, December the 12th, 1942. By February the 18th, they already had his squadron assembled in San Francisco, and they were loading on the Matsonia to head to Australia. It was definitely a very uncertain time in the history of the United States. We didn't know if the Japanese were going to go ahead and move in and take Hawaii and go ahead and really finish us off. And the main thing these squadrons were doing at that point in time were trying to slow down the shipping of men and supplies to these islands so that the troops we had out there would not have the Japanese forces resupplied. There wasn't there was not a lot of fancy aerial combat as you see in the things. Dad's comment was there was nothing glorious about this. It was a matter of trying to survive. Of the 18 pilots, 3 were lost on the first island at Tonga. The captain of the squadron, Hubble, he was lost on Guadalcanal, as was Norris. Whereas other people got to come home, they pulled Dad out of a fighter squadron, and he didn't come back for 3.5 years. He may have been one of the longest servicemen to stay in the Pacific in World War II, but it definitely changes your outlook on the world and life, and it was an interesting time. Some of these photos you're looking at, most of these are taken on Tonga. The one in Dad in that aircraft, the number 5 on it. Dad's tent mate was a fellow named Hulbert, and Hulbert was from Geneva, Ohio, and Dad considered him the best fighter pilot in the squadron, and he was killed on Dad's wing off of New Caledonia, just on a diving run. When you're just doing a practice run on a sunken freighter, and he overpowered the plane and blacked out, went up to about 10,000 feet, spun it, went in the ground. So Dad watched who he considered the best pilot just kill himself right off his wing. And he was Dad's tent mate. So Dad sent all his personal belongings back to his mom in Geneva, Ohio, and wrote a note with it. And after World War II, the reason we have so many photos is because Hilbert's the only one that had a camera. And he took these photos, and she sent these photos back to Dad after the war. And that's very much appreciated. Matter of fact, a unique thing, his brother was a pilot also, Hulbert's was, and I was in the house over here at my mom's house, and the phone rang one day, and Dad was there in the kitchen at the table, and he asked if Bill Hart still lived there, and I said, yeah, it's Dad. And he said, I'm so-and-so Hulbert. And he said, I'm a pilot, and my brother was a pilot. And he said, yeah. I said, yes, I've heard about you 1,000 times. He said, is your dad there? I said, yeah. And he wanted to know how his brother had died, what the circumstances were, and how well he knew him. And he said, I knew him well. I was his tent mate. He said, I got your name from a letter that had gone to my mother. And he said, I saw your brother go down, and I circled and circled, and he never came up. But he was able to tell him the day, the time, and exactly what they were doing when his brother died, which is kind of a unique thing to share with somebody. At the same time Dad was in the Pacific, Mom was out here at East Tennessee State, and kind of treasure this photo, but they wanted to promote the sale of savings bonds during the war. So Mom's the one that's seating in this photo, and to her left is Sarah Fink, and to her right is Lula Smith. I'm pretty sure Lula Smith is her name. Then after Dad got back, of course, married Mom. Dad did, before we move on, I want to make a comment here. Dad did make the comment numerous times that he was surprised that Mom could stay with him that first year of marriage. To pull out of a military environment, to come back and defocus yourself where you can function in society, after 3.5 years of that, Dad said, he made the comment that I definitely was not very easy to live with. And and he made that comment numerous times. So he did realize, Mom said he would be sitting at a table and just jump straight up in the air and not come back for 5 or 6 hours. So the impact of that is huge on a human being. The photo you're looking at now, but Dad got to do a lot of things, and my comment has always been, as my sister's, he came back, got decommissioned out of the military, went to UT and got a master's in industrial arts, and he was teaching school at North Junior High and coaching football. Well, the Korean War broke out, and he was given the opportunity to rejoin the military, and so 2 weeks later, we were at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and after that, Dad decided to stay in and finish out the 20 years. So our lives changed. Instead of us being raised here at the home place, because Dad had already built a house, we rented it different places we were stationed. We went from here to there. But one of the unique things, in 1956, Dad was assigned to the United Nations to do the negotiations as a secretariat to the UN in South Korea. So Mom, Mary, Carol, and my two sisters, we came back to Johnson City that year. And that was really a neat year because every evening we were out here at the home place from school. We stayed in an apartment in Johnson City. But I got to be around my grandmother, I got to be around the farm. She had some old cows she milked. She'd save all the seed from the garden. She was just the most fascinating person to me. She'd fix the buttermilk, she'd fix the milk and the cheese. She'd mix all the different sausages, she'd can everything. It was just constant all the time doing something agricultural-wise for self-sufficiency. So I got a real love for this type of lifestyle. But Dad came back from Korea, and there's some other pretty interesting shots we've got, but he came back and took us to Japan for 2 years. I wish I had been a little older to appreciate the culture. I was like a lot of Americans. I felt like we'd whipped them and they needed to learn English, where we really could have learned from their culture and a lot of other things that they did. But it was interesting. The photo you're looking at there, Dad took the photo, and the Emperor's Shrine is behind us there. And I was looking at that photo. It's myself and Mary and Carolyn and Mom, and that picture would have been taken in 1958. But if you look behind there, those trees are 40 and 50 feet high behind that moat, go around the Emperor's Shrine. So what that tells us is that during our bombing campaign, we leveled Tokyo. There was nothing but ashes left. Those trees behind there, we did not bomb the Emperor's Shrine or the mound. We needed somebody to negotiate with when this war ended. So we were very careful not to bomb those territories. The other picture is there at Fuchu, where Dad was stationed at the officers' open mess. We ate over there numerous times. Dad definitely felt like it was important to climb Mount Fuji, and that doesn't sound like a really tough thing to do. But realize that thing is 14,000 feet. There weren't any fancy trails. It was lava rock. It was the last day you could climb it. It was sleeting, snow, and rain sideways. We slept on the side of the mountain, and the wind must have been blowing 40, 50 miles an hour. I would have been in the 3rd grade, and my sister would have been in the 6th grade. We finally got to the top of the mountain volcano the next morning, and it was so foggy you couldn't even look down into it. You were lucky to be able to keep track of the person in front of you. But that just shows you Dad's determination on things that he thought should happen. And in those photos you're seeing Mary and Carolyn, and the other photo you're seeing myself and Captain Stein. The next photo is Dad sitting at a table. And this is kind of unique because we're jumping back to Korea here. But that table is half in North Korea and half in South Korea. And Dad didn't smile a whole lot, but if you look at that photo, he's got a really unique smile on his face there. When there weren't any North Koreans in the room, he walked into North Korea, and he is sitting in the chair of the North Korean negotiator and has that military photographer take his picture. And when he sent that to Mom, he wrote that in his own handwriting on the back of the photo, so there is some credibility that that's exactly where he was. We're going to begin to move into more recent times. The next shot is a really good shot of Pat. I married Pat Cornett, and that picture, Laura Lee is very young there, so that picture was taken probably about 1980. The next shot's up at the house just above the log cabin here. We built a house up there. Pat's parents were very influential in that. J.I. and Oreen Cornett, they helped us build the road up to the house. Mom and Dad pitched in. But anyway, that's Laura Lee's birthday, and Laura Lee and Kelly there with Mom and Dad. Dad loved the farm here. He loved showing it off. He loved the grandkids and other kids to be on the tractor. The shot you're looking at there, Kent's sitting in the tractor, David Coleman's in the photo, and Bill Allen and Jody, my older sister's two boys out of Chattanooga are up. You move over to the Cornett family. J.I. and Oreen loved grandkids. I think they lived, J.I. valued family, and so did Oreen. And Laura Lee and Kelly are playing on a couch there with Reagan, who was Larry's daughter. The next shot is really good. It's Pat, it's J.I., and I'm pretty sure it's Laura Lee and Oreen, and that's at their house in Elizabethton. But what's really neat, if you look at that mantle, it's on Christmas, and if you look at that mantle behind J.I., he rebuilt the covered bridge. He was a contractor in Elizabethton, and well, he built stuff all around East Tennessee here. But that beam on that mantle came from the covered bridge in Elizabethton. It's a huge chestnut beam. On Father's Day, we did a lot of different things. The next shot's a good shot of J.I. Dad and me. We were grilling chicken on Father's Day over at Mom's at the home place. Really good photo of Mary, Carol, and me, and I'm not even sure who took that picture. Mom and Dad loved the swimming pool. Frank Jarrett helped Dad build a swimming pool at the end of the house, along with several of us, and Carolyn Roberts' 4 youngsters are there with Mom and Dad. They spent a lot of time at the swimming pool, some good times and some good family bonds. The next photo is really good. It's of Bill Allen. That's my sister in Chattanooga's oldest son, and Lee. And they have 2 children, Mary Claire and Amelia Grace, and they live out in Kansas City. The next photo goes back to that swimming pool. As Mom and Dad begin to age, they begin to enjoy that part of life more than ever. Nancy and Paul are very unique. Nancy is the daughter of Lois Hart, married, her dad was James Fletcher. I can truly say Uncle Jimmy is one of the better people I've ever met in life. When Dad was in Korea, several times he came by and got me. I was in the 2nd grade, and would take me to basketball games out at East Tennessee State, what's it now, East Tennessee State University. He was very active in the Baptist Church in Elizabethton, and many of the items here in the log cabin have come from Nancy. The bed upstairs in one room is it's the bed of my grandmother Hart's and Benjamin Franklin, Eula Pickering's. A lot of the furniture in here, many of the items that were in their house that are in here were donated by Nancy because she just felt like this was unique, preserving the history of the family. Paul is a chemist. I'm pretty sure he got his doctorate from Purdue. Don't hold me against that, Paul, if I'm not exactly right there. But he's been at Eastman quite a while, and has worked there and semi-retired, and have even pulled him back. After Pat and I got married, we headed on a honeymoon, and one of the unique stops we went to was Jekyll Island. And there was a couple standing over there, and they said, "Can we take this photo right here of you all?" And we said, "Yes, we'd love for you to." And that's a really unique shot down at Jekyll Island. Shannon, my sister's daughter, married a young man, Colin, from Ireland, and this group photo is many of the Irish group that were here, and that's the day after the wedding. And I said, you know, let's go down and get the tractor, and let's get a shot with the tractor in it by the swimming pool and a group photo, and we did that. Jeff and Liz. Jeff is Carolyn Roberts' older son. Jeff's a physical therapist. Liz is a medical doctor, and they've recently had a child, Cam. And those two are very, really, that's what you hope for in people, where you can develop and tool yourself to give back to others, and they've definitely done that. This other picture encompasses a number of individuals in it within the family. This is John and Taylor's wedding, Barnes in Knoxville. last year. Duke's on the left. There's just Dawson's on the right. Kent and Larry and Lisa. Just a really good time, really good folks. The next shot, we talked about Dad's brother, Frank Hart. It's interesting how you admire people. I thought, you know, for someone to quit school in the 7th grade to go support the family, this was what Uncle Frank did. He went and started pumping gas at Free Service Tire Company. When he passed away, he eventually owned a 4th Free Service Tire Company. As I picture him, he was solid muscle. He was a small man, but he knew every number on every tire at Free Service Tire Company. He was a man that I highly respected. He married a Laws from Old Butler, and that's Aunt Mary in the photo and Dad at the table, probably at Thanksgiving. But Aunt Mary kept talking. She was raised in Old Butler, which is now covered by Watauga Lake. Her father was a postmaster. And I vividly remember her talking. Every time we were there, she was talking about her house being underwater. And we don't understand the emotional impact of that, but she would tell about how on Sunday afternoon they would get a boat and they would float over to right on top of where their house was on Sunday afternoon, just to remember what it was like to live in that spot. So when we condemn property and move people, most of the time till their death, they don't get over that. It has a tremendous emotional impact. Let's move back to the farm and some of the unique stuff. The farm will never look like it did. We must have worked for 3 months trying to get the farm ready for Laura Lee and Philip's wedding. And we had a lot of help from Mike Nidifer with pumpkins and Jamie Hughes with straw. And a lot of the pumpkins, a lot of the mums were bought when Laura Lee and Philip came over on Gap Creek from Larry Nave. So we filled my truck full of mums. And then the next shot is in front of Kelly and Chris's house where the wedding took place. And Philip lined up 3 photographers to film this event. And they were quite good. And they were unique to watch what they did and the kind of shots that they wanted. But that was really a fun time. It was a great day. The weather cooperated, and we kind of tried to build the wedding around bad weather, and we didn't have to deal with that. It was a little cool, but it was perfect. It was great because Mom could get up to the wedding, and that's Carolyn, Mary, Mom, and Jody at Laura Lee's wedding just before the wedding took place. The next shot is Philip and Laura Lee in a tent. We had a tent here between the 2 barns, and it was really good. But that's Philip and Laura Lee cutting the cake. The next morning after the wedding, we went back up to look at all the chairs and how we all laid it out. And Jody was with me, and Jody was fascinated by this cannon in my son-in-law Chris Jordan's yard up there. And he said, "Keith, is it legal to have a cannon in your yard?" And I said, "Jody, let's just don't go there." But it probably is not legal to have the cannon sitting in his front yard. But who's going to care at this point? It's neat to have a cannon in your yard. UT Ag Day is a really fun thing at Knoxville, and Laura Lee and Kelly both really enjoy UT football. I think they enjoy it whether winning or losing as far as they're concerned. But at Ag Day, we went down, and the shot in front of the pumpkins and the straw was at Ag Day down on the UT campus at Knoxville. It was just really unique. Chris Jordan, Dempsey, and Charlotte have 3 beautiful granddaughters, and I'm glad to see that somebody appreciates daylilies besides me. Those girls love playing the daylilies, and that's a great thing to have them out here running around. After the wedding, Laura Lee had a great picture with Mom there at the wedding. Mom now turned 89, and to celebrate that, we went over to the Old Barn restaurant, and after we ate, we got a group shot out front. And it's truly a really neat photo, and it's something I know as the family we got copies of that given to everybody. But we had a really good time. Mom had a good time, and it was a great thing to get to do that. We're going to kind of wind this story down with the latest addition to the family, and I hope there's many more from many different sources. But Chris and Kelly had a little baby here 6 weeks ago, and they named her Peyton. And matter of fact, she should have just come this week, so she was 5 to 6 weeks early. But she's doing quite well, and we're tickled to death to have her here. and hopefully she can grow and get strong and make a difference in the lives of others also. We've certainly hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something about where you come from or where the people that you associate with have come from. Thank you.